Once again, Suyong Chung, professor at the Korea University. Let me just share the screen for my presentation. Okay, this is Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, rules of the Article 6 in implementing NDC. NDC means nationally determined contributions. So my presentation may relate to my earlier presentation today about Korea Green New Deal concept in the context of COVID-19. In my presentation on the Green New Deal, I indicated that Ethiopian government may want to utilize the current NDC, in other words, CRGE, in order to develop the further government policy measures to address COVID-19 recovery plans. And as in Korea, if that would be the case in Ethiopia, then the next question is how would you be able to secure the necessary funding to support all these further efforts by the Ethiopian government? So in the sense that in developing countries, you may have two options. First option will be further mobilizing domestic finance resources. And second option will be then maybe you might want to seek for alternate or additional funding from outside Ethiopia. And then my presentation today is about how you can use Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Many people call this as a carbon market as a way of actually bringing more financial resources for Ethiopia. So let me show you the text of the Article 6. I assume that you may not seen the text of the Article 6 yet. This will be the first time. This is a sort of the new carbon market as a nickname under the Paris Agreement. How long is it? It's not that long. This is all that we have for now in the context of how we can use Article 6 mechanism under the Paris Agreement. So this shows that the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, it has only 9 paragraphs. 9 paragraphs consist of the several parts. First part, I would say the general principle. Second, third, consist of the one mechanism. It will consist of one mechanism, and then that's a 6.2 mechanism. So it's not that long. If you read things, you can see toward the nationally determined contributions, and then international transfer mitigation outcomes, double counting, robust accounting, voluntary, things like that. And then another mechanism under the Paris Agreement, Article 6, comes with paragraph 4, 5, 6, 7. We call it as a mechanism. It will look similar to that of the CDM. Okay, I think some of you at least may know the CDM. And this second mechanism will be similar to that of the CDM. And then third mechanism, we call it as a non-market mechanism. Somehow, non-market mechanism comes in as a part of a market mechanism. That's because of the negotiation beauty. One country strongly opposed to agree on the Article 6 text unless they would, countries would agree on including this mechanism. So this is we call non-market mechanism, and then it's largely not considered in the context of how we can use the market principles in mobilizing financial resources. But anyway, once again, there are 3 mechanisms: 6.2 mechanism, 6.4 mechanism, and 6.8 mechanism. And today, my presentation will focus on mainly 6.2 and 6.4 mechanisms. So Article 6, as I said, as you will read later on, the text that I provided, it doesn't mention anything about the market in any wording in the text of Article 6. However, it indicates the importance of carbon pricing. If we read it carefully, emphasize voluntary cooperation. Nobody will force anybody to use market mechanism. It's up to you. It's up to Ethiopia, no matter whether you want to use it or not. And it presumes the use of market principle, once again, through Article 6.2 and 6.4. So it doesn't necessarily mean market itself, but largely it is associated with the market principles and market instruments. What does this mean? If we read Article 6, and then we can find out the three implications out of it. First, this could be probably one of the very few, probably the only article under the Paris Agreement which promotes interstate cooperation to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement. So Article 6 emphasizes that, okay, countries can work together to implement its NDC, okay? So interstate cooperation is explicitly, mentioned in this article. Number two, depending on how you understand this, as I said before, it can be a window for climate financing. In other words, if you use it wisely and creatively, actually you can bring a lot more additional climate financing from not only public sector, but also private sector outside Ethiopia. It's also an important way of ensuring transparency and sustainable development, as the Article 6 text itself says so. So in other words, this is the map of Northeast Asia. Depending on how you use market mechanism, this is fire, forest fire in Siberia. It's a huge forest fire going on because of the global warming these days. And this is the desertification in Mongolia and China. And as you can see, Korean Peninsula, South Korea looks green, whereas northern part looks not green because they are cutting trees a lot. And all this, in order to address all these issues, then you need to develop the new mechanisms, okay, in terms of economic development. And to meet the financial needs, you can put market mechanism systems, okay? So role of the carbon markets in general, traditionally, involves it's a flexible, cost-effective, and then it's lowest cost mitigation opportunities are available, and then it can expand the range of mitigation opportunities, and then it can help parties to be more ambitious, and then however, it needs to be environmentally robust, and then they are linked to each other. So some people say that, okay, ETS, emission trading system, is very, very important, and the CDN comes in another context. And these are traditional, topics that we discuss about in the context role of the carbon market. Of course, Article 6 may have these functions as well. However, under the Paris Agreement, Article 6 may have additional functions or additional or different implications. Number one, Article 6 only concerns about NDC implementation. No matter whether you engage in the Article 6 transactions, all these outcomes must be used to implement NDC. For instance, Samsung would like to buy credits out of Ethiopia in order to meet their domestic obligations to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that they're gonna use the credits for that purpose. It is not covered by Article 6. It was covered by the previous Kyoto Protocol, but currently Samsung is not using those credits in order to implement Korean NDC. So therefore, it is not covered by Article 6. So there is a big difference. In other words, central player of the Article 6 mechanisms must be the government, especially central governments. So it should be done mainly through the government to government transactions. If we want to include the private sectors inside, then those private transactions needs to be further, measured through the government, instruments. So ultimately, then government needs to able to calculate how much CO2 emissions were reduced, and then how those reduced outcomes would be transacted, traded each other. So low carbon technology development and transfer can happen, ultimately to support the sustainable development. What does this mean? For instance, say I show you a big number of the government budget to support Korea Green New Deal, assuming that Korean government would like to include one more component of the strengthening international development cooperation with the developing countries, and therefore assuming that $1 billion will be available by the Korean government to support the developing countries to address climate change. Then assuming that the head of the government, President of the Republic of Korea, would like to suggest the Prime Minister of Ethiopia say, okay, we have a $1 billion stimulus package available for you. Okay, so traditionally we have done in the context of development cooperation. Here, he could suggest to Ethiopia, your Prime Minister, saying that, okay, this money will be used in order to promote low carbon development, CRGE in other words. And then we can actually set the baseline, and the Korea would like to provide this money for upcoming, say, 5 years or 10 years, so that if we, put all these, available resources in the right way, then we can say that, okay, amount of the CO2 emission reduction will be made, say, by 100 units. And then now Korean government may suggest to Ethiopian government, okay, I understand that it's additional reduction in the Ethiopian side. Why don't you just to use maybe 30%, 40%, for the purpose of implementing Korean NDC, because Korean emission target says that we can actually use international, credits or emission reduction outcome to cover 4% of the Korean reduction target. It should come from the outside. So we can use it actually in order to meet Korean NDC achievement. And then thereby Korea can report back to UNFCCC. We have been implementing all these plans as we submitted before to the UNFCCC. So in this context, this is a new one. CDM doesn't say that, okay? It doesn't involve the direct transaction between the countries. But Article 6 will allow the governments to negotiate on this matter. So this is it will eventually promote, once again, technology transfer and then securing additional financing resources for developing countries. So let me just skip some of the slides. I will upload this slide later on in the project website so that you can see all those slides. So here, Article 6 is a window for climate finance. Therefore, in global climate finance architecture, if we want to talk about the climate finance sources once again, we can think about public sources like ODA, right? And then develop bank type instruments. If Ethiopia would like to get some loan from the World Bank, that will be the case. Private capital, say these days off-grid renewals are popular. So private sectors might want to invest in Ethiopia, then naturally private money might come into Ethiopia, right? And then carbon markets. Before, carbon markets means that the CDM, and in case of the between the developed countries, there was a issue of joint implementation. So here, carbon market used to be one of the sources. Okay, what I'm talking about today, if you read text of the Article 6 very carefully, actually, that's why I was not calling Article 6 as a carbon market per se. You can design actually this Article 6 mechanism to bring all these relevant sources all together, especially public sources from a donor country. Okay, this may come from different points. Once again, Article 6 says that it should be used for the implementation of NDC. Okay, NDC owners are only central governments. Okay, international transfer of mitigation outcome. We call these guys not as credits, but the mitigation outcomes. And those mitigation outcomes can be transferred mainly by central governments. Okay, you can put the different options in this basket. In other words, under the Kyoto Protocol, we differentiate carbon market and climate finance. Carbon market was one of the tiny, options available in the climate finance. However, what I'm talking about today is that if you design the Article 6 mechanism very well, then you can actually use this concept to bring the various sources of climate finance. So you see the differences. In other words, as you can see here, you can see bilateral agencies like GIZ and COICA, multilateral agencies, banks like World Bank, and then you see GCF, GEF, UNFCCC. They have their climate finance sources. And also another source used to be public-private sources. Okay, carbon market under the Kyoto Protocol. Actually, if you know the CDM, sources of the carbon market under the Kyoto Protocol comes from this sector, public-private sources. Okay, and all others, development assistance, and then new and additional climate finance. So you may know the NAMA project and the CIF and others, right? There were different, sources, and the CDM was one of them. What I'm talking about is that you can, somehow, put all these ones, especially development assistance sources, okay? You can put them, sometimes you can combine this with, say, GCF funding together, right? And then you can bring these additional climate finance sources to support implementing your, NDC, that's a CRGE. How to do it? It's very flexible. Article 6 says that there are several conditions. You should, comply with very strong accounting rules, and then it should be used to support the sustainable development. There is no double counting. These are the conditions for now. Okay, so of course, the detailed rules will be available sooner or later from the UNFCCC negotiations, but it's very, very simple and flexible. There is no precedence on this matter yet. Okay, so then let me just go through Article 6 governance issues one by one very quickly. Structure of the Paris Agreement. So Paris objective is to keep the 2-degree target, right? To do so, there is a mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology, and the capacity building, transparency requirement. We call these 6 as the 6 pillars. And there is a red plus, Article 6, loss and damage. Without having this, you can still achieve the objective of the Paris Agreement. But if we would have this, then it will be additional. It will help actually countries to better achieve the target objective of the Paris Agreement, right? So Article 6 says, as I said, nobody will force Ethiopia to use Article 6 mechanisms, but it will be only, good for Ethiopia to consider using this. So as I said, there has been no negotiations, and then we are now almost the end of the negotiations. So last year, we are supposed to finish the negotiation on the detailed rules of the Article 6, but in Madrid, somehow at the last minute, I was there, the negotiation was not successful enough to reach the agreement among the parties. Structure of the Article 6, 6.2, once again, there are some issues pending. And then this is one of the example that we might be able to imagine. This is a joint crediting mechanism developed by the government of Japan. This mechanism was developed under the Kyoto Protocol. So this mechanism still needs to be adjusted or changed later on in accordance with some of the detailed rules of the Article 6. As I understand, that's the intention that government of Japan has now. So very simple. Japanese government identified the host country, say Indonesia, okay? And they formed a joint committee, right, to develop some of the detailed rules. And then all these technical issues are pretty much similar to that of those of the CDM, but they are a bit flexible enough, and then they can do so as long as they don't breach against the rules of the Kyoto Protocol. So, they form the joint committee, and then there are project participants involved, and the third-party entities sometimes validate the projects and the verified amount of GHG emission reductions and removals. These are done in the case of CDM by the Secretary of the UNFCCC, right? But they can do that by themselves. Article 6.2 mechanism can be more flexible than this, okay? So if Ethiopia can identify the good partner, you can pretty much actually design the mechanism by yourself through a negotiation with another country. So JCM might be a good example, but you cannot use JCM as a 6.2 mechanism because this was developed by the Kyoto Protocol, under the Kyoto Protocol, okay? Now we live under the Paris Agreement, so this one needs to be further revised even, okay? And then to do so, one question is a so-called corresponding adjustment. In other words, 4 megatons. This is a case of Ethiopia. If we would like to share 4 megatons reduction to Korea, acquiring party, then Korea's emission reduction target will be reduced by this amount. And then Ethiopia, you actually use the 4 megatons for another country, you end up with increasing your emissions by 4 megatons. However, you still have leftovers. So it's good, right? You produce textiles and you would like to export them in case actually you have exceeded the amount of textiles available so that you can get the cash out of Ethiopia. Same reasoning, right? It's another kind of carbon product. Make it simple to understand, okay? So there is no harm for Ethiopia to engage in this. And this additional 4 megatons, can be made by using some of the additional climate financing resources coming from outside, right? So it will only create the opportunities. And then you need to have very good accounting rules complied with in accordance with Paris Agreement. That's corresponding adjustment. There are several ways of doing so, depending on the different NDC types of the engaging countries. 6.4, as I said, it looks similar to the CDM. There are some still issues that we need to clarify in the negotiations, also later on during the time of implementing this 6.2 mechanism in your country if you want. And then CDM, once again, what is the future of the CDM? You might have a question, not yet decided, okay? There is still question whether or not countries will allow the CDM credits, in other words, CERs, to be recognized by the Paris Agreement or not, still on the issue in the negotiations. So there are several options in case of the future of the CDM. So now where we are in terms of the negotiations, once again, I said that we are supposed to finish the negotiation last year in Madrid, but there are still some pending issues. First of all, this is the, there are some pictures that we got from last year. This is the COP25 venue in Madrid. This is the negotiation room on Article 6. Okay, it was one of the most difficult negotiation agenda in Madrid. As I said, that the countries still have not reached the agreement. And the Euro Commissioner and some others participated in some other related, activities. In Madrid, so this shows that negotiation text has been changed again and again toward the last minute. I thought that anyway we could reach the agreement, but because of the 4 issues, transition of the Kyoto mechanism, as I said, the CDM, share of the proceeds, the 5% of the share to be used for the adaptation fund of the UNFCCC. This is still pending issue. Double counting, how to avoid the double counting, overall mitigation in global emissions. All these efforts needs to contribute to reduce greenhouse gas emissions overall at the global level, and detailed, techniques and then details are different among the parties. Because of the 4 issues pending last year, we are supposed to finish this negotiation actually in Glasgow this year, but due to COVID-19, UNFCCC postponed the this COP meeting this year to next year in Glasgow. So we have to finish these negotiations by next year. If we would finish them, once again, as I indicated, we will have 2 mechanisms, 6.2 mechanisms, 6.4 mechanisms. 6.4 mechanism will be similar to that of the CDM, right? It's a small scale of the project. 6.2 mechanisms will be government to government, and then nobody will decide the mechanism itself. It's up to the parties, as long as they comply with the rules on double counting, avoiding double counting, sustainable development, robust accounting rules, and then all the environment integrity, as long as parties comply with these rules, and then you can design the mechanism by yourself. You can put things and then set the baseline, calculate the reduced emission outcomes, and it's up to the countries how much you can exchange it, right? In any kind of form by bringing more technology and finance resources for your country if you are willing to do so. In the sense that I think it will be very good if Ethiopia would put the additional government unit which will handle this issue later on. Then you can use this government unit inside your commission to have negotiations or discussions with the potential donors, governments, and later on some other, World Bank, deposit some of the mitigation outcomes coming from developed countries. So, there will be some of the additional benefits that you can create. So nobody will force, once again, Ethiopia or any developing countries to introduce this mechanism. But as I understand that, different from the CDM, depending on how you design it, it can bring the large amount of the tangible benefits to Ethiopia. So at the national level, at the international level, there are some issues that Ethiopia might want to consider in order to grab this good possible opportunities under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Finally, these are some of the pictures, or some of them you already saw. that my group together with the partner organizations here and there worked on the market Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Chong, for your presentation. And now, please welcome Dr. Park once again, who will moderate the Q&A session for this module. Dr. Park.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Thank you, Professor Zhang. Professor Zhang explained the critical information on Article 6 of Paris Agreement with concise and useful and various examples. In particular, the Green New Deal announced in the morning and the international market mechanism just presented are closely related. It is also associated with CRGE and is connected to the carbon market. Unfortunately, this topic is too difficult for me also. Anyway, first question. Thanks for your in-depth elaboration of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. As you might know, Ethiopia has started a comprehensive tree planting program through the Prime Minister's Green Legacy Initiative. What should Ethiopia do more to benefit from the market mechanism on the Article 6? Can you answer?
Hey, I can spend more than an hour to answer this question.
Sorry.
But let me answer in 1 or 2 minutes. So first of all, in case Ethiopia would like to use this Article 6 mechanism in relation to the forest sector, there is a first challenging question, whether or not the forest sector can be used actually to generate credits. I said credits under Article 6 is called as ITMO, International Transfer Mitigation Outcomes. And this is one of the hot negotiation topic in the UNFCCC. So in other words, mitigation outcome, whether or not it would include the issue of the sinks, that's related to forestry. And then the Government of the Republic of Korea is very, very active to push actually all these member countries to include the sinks. In other words, in order to include the forest sector to be covered by Article 6. And then I think likely it will happen, okay? And then number 2, to do so, say when you develop your planting plans in Ethiopia, first of all, you need to set the baseline, right? And then you need to calculate how much you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? And then in accordance with Article 13 of the UNFCCC Paris Agreement, that's transparency requirement. In other words, in your country, you call it as MRV, okay? Your MRV system must be compatible with that of the UNFCCC, in other words, Paris Agreement, okay? And then you have your national MRV, and many of your planting programs and the projects will be done at the local level. Then your national MRV inventory system, in other words, must be able to capture what's going on at the local level. So in other words, it's very, very critical for Ethiopia to develop not only national MRV system in accordance with the requirements under the Paris Agreement, but at the same time, based on that, you need to further develop your sub-national MRV systems. Either those sub-national activities can be automatically reflected on your national MRV system, or you have a different system, but you have a mechanism actually to share the outcomes of the MRV management for the national purpose. So it is up to you, but it needs to be placed first within your government. Okay, that's the first step. And then I said forestry is likely to be included. I'm very positive. And the second, I have observed the MRB activities by Ethiopia. So you are one of the leading countries among the developing countries. I'm pretty certain. Okay. So if you cannot have a full MRB system placed in every provinces, I know that some of the provinces in your country already have like a province level of the Red Cross programs and then similar ones. So maybe that could be the first starting point. Okay. And then I indicated that you might want to, Ethiopian government might want to establish a government unit to deal with, to handle the transferring mitigation outcomes that can be calculated based on your national inventory system in the case of transactions who are transferring mitigation outcomes to another country. National MRV system is a domestic one, but you need to have a unit which will handle the transactions, trading, right, with other countries. Those other countries will be likely the governments, not the private sectors. Once again, CDM will used to involve the private sectors to a large extent, as I showed you before. And then Article 6.4 mechanism will bring the private sectors, but ultimately all these things needs to be gone through the hands of the governments, okay? Paris Agreement is still in the negotiation on this matter. So we don't have yet concrete examples available, but I think it's very good for Ethiopia to think about, transfer ready projects available, right? As, negotiation would be finished, and then you can engage in additional activity to utilize Article 6 right away. So there are some steps that you need to do, but once again, I have a very positive response to your country about the possibility of using Article 6 to deal with forest sector. I'm sure that it will bring the more financial resources for your country to better implement your CRG.
Thank you very much. The Deputy Director of COICA, Mr. Sin, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mr. Sin?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, okay. I understand that you prepared some project in for 2021. In that project, you mentioned about some Paris Agreement and carbon market and Article 6. So, and I guess I do not receive many questions for these topics because it is too difficult. And what do you expect from that project? And can you tell me about your opinion about the 6.2 or Article 6 and why you prepared that Article 6 in that project? Can you explain to us the
Yes.
importance of Article 6 and others?
In the previous session, our country director briefly indicated that there is a new project entitled Forestry Rehabilitation Program in partnership with GGGI is coming earlier next year for the implementation. Under this program, we do aims to recover the forest around the 13,000 hectares in the selected watershed in the Ethiopia. And that is the main project interventions. But in parallel with that intervention, we are also aiming to set up a government structure in preparation of the Article 6 negotiation under the Paris Agreement. Well, we consider this Article 6 activities support to the Ethiopian government might be some of the initiative to get the Ethiopian government prepared more for the carbon credit transaction in the coming years of the Paris Agreement. But as of now, we in order for the Article 6 and ITMOR to be truly beneficial, I think that a certain safeguard needs to be put in place to prevent some pitfalls that the previous international offset schemes such as the CDM and the joint implementation. So there is something to be seen under this Paris Agreement negotiation, because there should be some rule book for the transaction happening this credit transaction. So we will see, because we do have some years before our implementation of our project in partnership with the GGGI. So we will make a design for our project to incorporate this Paris Article 6 activity into our program. So as of now, I can only hope that the negotiation process finish soon, so that'll guide us to design more our activity relating to the Article 6. That is all.
Thank you very much for your explanation. I hope you can share your ideas with your colleagues and spread your ideas to among the Koika friends. Thank you very much. Thanks for your
thanks.
support. Thanks. I still have 3 more minutes. Any other questions from the participants' floors?
Let me
yeah.
add some more words. First
Yes,
of all,
yeah.
I turned the screen mode to be able to watch the many people here, but you know, I only see many names, not many faces. I assume that many of you are listening rather than watching my presentation now. What I talked about Article 6 might, you know, to you a little bit difficult, but actually it's not. You might feel difficult because we don't still have yet any precedent case, okay? But I indicated, for instance, JCN can be a basis to design the new mechanism, okay? In developing world, even Korea used to do that before. We used to use the things that are already available in a very advanced developed countries. But actually, mitigation outcome can be more generated possibly in developing countries. So you should be able to yourself actually to best utilize your products, right? To get maximize the benefits out of it. And the Article 6 only emphasized the voluntary cooperation, right? It's cooperation means that it needs to make win-win situation, right? Good for both. And then it's additional, right? It's not a zero-sum game. It's a win-win situation. And I see that the potential a lot while I have been in the UNFC negotiation as a part of Korean delegation as an advisor on Article 6 issues, okay? So you can still design it, you know, if you are familiar with ETS or CDM, but you can design the complete different mechanisms as well. Some developing countries don't have a good you know, sense of introducing CDM or ETS right away. You may not be ready, or you may have not good experiences before. And Article 6 is not identical. If I ask the European negotiators, many of them tell me that, okay, Article 6 mechanism is not about linking ETSs. It's not. Okay, it can be one of the mechanisms, but it's not automatically. Okay, so it could mean something else. As I said, it could be very simple. Okay, and then UNFCCC is not that complicated a document and rules that it has. So as you understand, okay, in case of Ethiopia, you belong to the African group and LDC groups in the negotiations. And then Ethiopia may need to follow their general directions, but at the same, as a sovereign nation, sovereign country, you can also have your own mechanisms, okay, within the category. So in the sense that, just to be the first runner all the time, then you will grab more opportunities. Okay, there will be challenges, of course, but you will grab more opportunities in return for taking challenges, right? If you well address all these challenges. So this is my last words in the closing my responses to your potential possible questions or comments that you may have. Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Jung. I see many honorable professors from Hawassa University, Dr. Denabo and other professors. Please make or deliver your opinions in module 6 and 7. Okay, professors from the Hawassa University. Thank you. Ji-yoon,